Hi everyone, welcome to the Movieception Show. This is Fariba, and in this video we're going to do a Desi breakdown on Miss Marvel episode 3. I know it's a bit of a late, publication. There's just been a lot going on, but, better late than never, so I have now delivered. So now let's get right down into Miss Marvel episode 3, where we're going to talk a bit of some of the Desi scenes, especially the big wedding, which I'm very excited to talk about. So let's get started. Quick reminder that since India and Pakistan didn't get their independence until 1947, this means that they were still under British rule at that time. They don't really go deep into it, but it's a bit of a nice scene that they go into, kind of give a bit more of a background of what's going on, what are the origin of the Bengal that Kamala now has, and then kind of going more into sort of the story of why they're there, why they need this. So I kind of like this part right here. Kind of give a bit more of a definition of some of the names, like Noor meaning light. That's kind of a really nice job to put into the series, just to give like a bit of a meaning to it. I know with my name, because it is actually Persian, not Bengali, that it means charming, enticing, and it's nice to kind of have a bit of a education of what the meaning of the names are, what it kind of translates to. So that was definitely a really nice information to kind of get about like what Noor meant.
I'm sorry, did you just say Jin?
Okay, so it's very interesting that she talks about jinns, because jinns are actually Islamic supernatural beings in a sense. From what my parents explained to me, is that they're like angels or like spirits that like watch over you. Essentially, jinn isn't necessarily good, but necessarily bad. But basically, whatever you are doing, like the acts that you're performing, they're kind of there watching over you in a sense, kind of performing that. They don't really abide by anything like Islam or anything like that, from what I'm aware of. But yeah, I know that in a more of a general sense, a jinn is like a genie. I mentioned in my reaction video about the fact that the one I'm familiar with is the one from Supernatural. I believe it's like the first season where like Dean kind of gets uh, abducted by a jinn and kind of has his mind manipulated to like his greatest desires or whatnot. Slightly different from like a jinn that we're talking about here, because technically a jinn could be, it doesn't, they're not necessarily good or bad spirits or supernatural beings, but from what I'm aware of, that they're spirits in a way, sometimes even like kind of an angel of some sort, that you know kind of just, it's kind of more so of what you are doing in terms of your deeds. It could be a Muslim, it could be a non-believer, so on and so forth. So that's kind of just a more of a simplified version of what I'm aware of. Again, I'm not too well versed of what a jinn is. Even my parents, who are a bit more devout Muslims, they don't really kind of talk about anything like this, like especially in terms of like supernatural stuff. But with that being said, like apparently there, from what my mom has told me, there are such things as supernatural things in terms of Islam that they do kind of believe in, like of course like the demons and all that. I remember I actually took my mom to go see a movie called Annabelle Comes Home, and I took my mom to it. She's not usually into those types of films, especially if it has anything like scares, horror, gore, whatnot. But she did watch this one, and she kind of paid attention to it. And I remember throughout the movie, she was giving me like commentary, saying like, "Oh, this is things like this. Actually, you can see happen in Islam and whatnot." I was like, "Oh, really?" Like, and then she was telling how even she was afraid of like so and so, like ghosts or whatnot. So that was something that I was very surprised to know about with Islam, because I know that, because I mean, growing up, I didn't know anything about the more supernatural stuff of it. Like, I just knew more of what the Quran itself was. But yeah, like knowing the fact that they actually incorporated the jinn, which is something that is sort of in the Islamic text, not in the Islamic text, but something that is kind of acknowledged, not just in more Islam, but I think in more of a general sense with religion, that it's very nice to kind of put it into the storyline for Kamala, just to be like, hey, this is sort of her origin, apparently that she is a jinn. So that was a pretty smart move right there. It's interesting that she's sharing about what jinns are, that they're a bit more of a scary story, just because from what my mom had told me, that jinns could be either good or bad, or again, they're not really affiliated in either sense. So I'm a bit surprised why she's mentioning that there's more scary parts of it. I know it's a bit more conflicting about what jinns are in general. Like, there's a possibility that jinns are, like if you are, saying things in the name of Allah, for instance, right? Like, they're probably not going to induce anything horrible on you or whatnot. They could actually come in a form, they can actually transform or shapeshift into different forms. So that's kind of where we get more of like the supernatural aspect of it from, supernatural. Where they can be in different forms or whatnot. Sometimes they can even be invisible, from what my mom told me. Like, at least she told me that it's not something that you can see. But again, I'm a bit surprised that she's only talking about more of like the nightmare of it, even though in a general sense, from what my mom had explained, that a jinn could be good or bad, or it could just, it doesn't really matter. So interesting thing right there. So I'm gonna go a bit more so in terms of just the Islamic thing about it, but also kind of showing a bit more of just the common experiences that Muslims have to deal with in terms of things like, you know, the damage control coming into a mosque and trying to investigate, a group of people. So, first things first, let's talk about more of the fact that this lady comes into a mosque wearing shoes. And I remember specifically from my reaction video that I literally flipped out, calling her out for being disrespectful, because when you are going to a sacred place like the mosque, right, you're supposed to remove your shoes before going inside, right? Because that's just what the practice is. Like, you have to remove your shoes. And the fact that she came into a mosque not just wearing her shoes, but like, gross ass shoes into a mosque and basically disrespecting a mosque is like, I totally was just upset about this part. I was like, wow, the amount of disrespect coming from damage control. Of course, you're gonna just walk in and just act as if you're superior, whatnot, just because you have to, in the sense that you're investigating Muslims. And going into that, of course, this kind of was a bit of a triggering moment, just because this is something that is a common thing that a lot of mosques have to deal with. That they're being watched over, they're being investigated by the FBI, or in this case, damage control, just because, of course, there's that long history regards to 9/11, and then there's, of course, the fact that that changed everything. And I mean, it's not just, again, for Americans, but also for Muslims ourselves. And it's like we're always deemed as if we are, dangerous people, that we're terrorists or whatnot, that we're plotting the next, attack or something. And this is where I get really upset, because like, that's not what every Muslim is. Like, not all Muslims are like this. If anything, you're having a scene, you're having like a mosque like here, where people are just, sitting down, just probably, having, I'm assuming this is Sunday, because it looks like people are studying the Quran, but people are just sitting down, kind of just conversing with one another, chilling and whatnot. And it's like, oh, look, here's the FBI coming in. Oh, it's like, oh, these are the dangerous people, whatnot, right? Of course, like, I mean, in this scene, they're trying to look for somebody, which is this, I think it was like Light Monkey. But yeah, one of the things I do love about this scene is what happens a few seconds later, where Nakia comes and just calls the but damage control out for coming inside, trying to search around without a warrant. And that's something that's very, very important, of course, because you can't just go and search a place without, getting a warrant for it. Of course you can get permission, but it's like, unless you have a reason why it's being searched, you can't just come in here and just, presume that anything that, somebody's gonna let you in and be like, oh, here, with your arms open, be like, welcome, do whatever, right? So that's not always the case. So a lot of things going on in this scene that I know that you can just tell from my reaction video. But again, it was very well executed, just kind of showing how, again, like, damage control has no respect for the Muslim community, and the fact that, they're, treating them as if they're just like, terrorists in a sense, like, oh, look, because you're Muslim, here you go, we gotta search you. But then again, it's like, you also have more of the political sense that, well, you can't come in here without, a warrant because that's their rights. So a lot going on in the scene, very well executed. Again, I think it's just more so because a lot of people know this experience. Whether, yeah, I mean, just it's well done scene. Some of you might be a bit confused why Nakia removed her job. Typically speaking, like if you are a Muslim woman, it's mostly that you wear your hijab when you're in public, or when there is men around that you have to wear hijab on. That's if you choose to wear hijab. So in this case, she removed it, and that's just because there's no men in the room. Kamal is the only person in the room, and she's a girl. So in this case, like, she easily removed her hijab, had no problem with it, and that's kind of why. So if anybody was confused why she removed her hijab, it's like, it's not a really big deal when the only person in the room is a girl. It would probably be a big deal if like her father and her brother were there. So yeah, that's just to kind of answer some questions there. So basically what I was saying earlier before, that's kind of just like the whole stereotype that that Muslims are essentially just planning another attack or something like that, when essentially like 99% of Muslims are literally just like normal citizens, just like, dealing with their own lives. And I can, resonate with Nakia's anger about this. So that's why, again, I wanted to mention that part, because there was a lot going on in that scene earlier. That's like, it's not just the fact that there's just so much disrespect, but it's the fact that they already have this notion that because they are Muslim, they're probably planning another attack or something, or that they're the ones who let the nightlight loose or something like that. So again, very big statement right here that I think is very important to kind of understand kind of our perspective, like what it feels like to be in our position as Muslims, that we have to keep facing this sort of stereotype, this prejudice that, like, because we are Muslims, because of what, just a few bad apples have done, that somehow they generalize a whole population of Muslims, and that's not okay. So again, a very, very bold statement right there. And she doesn't stop here a little bit because there is a lot going on. There's going to be a lot of pausing from here on out because we're going more into kind of like the Islamic traditions. So the first thing that the bride mentioned is like, is this all your family? And yeah, just so you know, we do have big families, and for the most part, we're pretty close and pretty tight with all of them. At least for my case, like, I'm really close with my mom's side, and my mom has 4 sisters. I think in total is like maybe 10 cousins. And each of the cousins I'm pretty close with. So simply speaking, when you do have a wedding, you're not just inviting like a few people, you're inviting like your whole family, your whole friends. Especially if it's like something more like the tradition stuff, like you always bring your family to come down and celebrate this big occasion that's about to happen between 2 people, right? So going into this scene, we are having a Mendi ceremony. And so just to kind of give an overview of what, weddings are like, it's a bit more complicated because you have to take in consideration 2 things. 1, the religion, and 2, the culture. And the reason why I say this is because, at least for me, considering that I come from the South, Asian subcontinent, that even though it is a whole region that might have like a general like similar practice, like in terms of its idea, the specifics of it are actually very different from within each area, right? So, for instance, like if you are a Hindu and you come from a region like, let's say Tamil, right? Then you're gonna have, of course, more of a Hindu ceremony, and then on top of that, you're gonna have more of the Tamilian sort of wedding, which again is very distinct and very different from like a Bengali wedding, right? For someone like me, like again, I'm Muslim, come from Bengali family, we will of course have like the Islamic traditions with the Nika ceremony, which I'll explain more into like when we get to that part. But also we have to also abide by more of the Bengali part as well, where it's like there's that sort of culture that you bring in as well. So in this case, now when it comes to Pakistani weddings, it's a bit more like general. So it's just more so going to be like a Islamic wedding. So like here is more Islamic, and I mean, but just like any other weddings, like at least there is going to be a Mendi ceremony. That's like the first thing that ever happens in a wedding. And typically with our weddings, whether it be Hinduism, Islam, or even just in terms of like the different regions and cultures, it's not something that you do in like a 1 day sort of ceremony. For us, it's like multiple days. So at least from what I've experienced, is usually around like 3 days is kind of like the norm. 2 or 3 days. So of course 1 day is dedicated to the Mendi ceremony, and that is basically where the bride, is getting her Mendi done, where they have like somebody who's like an artist drawing with a Mendi, tube around her arms and both sides, front and back, and sometimes even on the legs as well. And that's just part of the traditions of it. Like, regardless of like the culture or the religion, it's like a big part that you have the Mendi ceremony, and that's essential for the ladies. And at least in terms of here, it's not like a bridal shower where it's like, oh, you only have the ladies. Here it's like a mix, right? Everyone is co-ed, or at least the ones I've been to are like more co-ed, where everybody's kind of together, men and women, celebrating this big occasion, and having, the bride getting ready, having her Mendi done just for the big ceremony, because the Mendi is kind of like a really big part of like the culture, and like, it's like it's like a big thing that you kind of have to do in weddings. And so yeah, so like here it's like the Mendi, right? So that's the first day. They're not going to have the wedding the same night. That's going to be like a different night. But this is the Mendi ceremony right here. You're going to have like sweets. People are going to be talking, conversing. Usually when you do have a Mendi ceremony, from what I've seen in most cases, it's usually in like a house. Like here they did it at their home. Sometimes they might, rent out a banquet and have it there. I know even for me, sometimes, because I do have like a more of a Bengali culture, that there's more that they do. Like they do like the haldi scene, like the haldi thing is like one thing that we do have in part of our Bengali part of it, because again, like, it's not just a religion, but there's also a cultural aspect to it that you kind of have to take in consideration. So like, it's among cultures, right? So sometimes it might be done separate with a woman between the bride and the groom, or it could be done together. Like, at least the ones I've seen are done together, where you have the bride and the groom on their first, part of the ceremony, where it's like, okay, we're going to be giving out sweets, and we're going to also put on haldi on like their faces, just to, start the commemorating moment up until the wedding. And again, it just differs again in terms of like what culture or what norm you want to follow. Because again, like, most of the ones I've been to are also been a bit more Americanized as well. So the ones I've been to have less of the haldi scenes. Like, they might not even do the haldi. They might just do like the Mendi ceremony, and that's about it. Like, people will just eat, kind of converse, and probably like there might be speeches or what. Well, speeches are more reserved for the wedding, but there's gonna be some sort of aesthetic or whatnot going on. Again, it's a bit more of a casual moment though when it comes to the Mendi ceremony, whereas the wedding's a bit more formal. But yeah, that's just something that I wanted to mention. So this is the first part of the wedding, or leading up to the wedding, which is the Mendi scene, which is again a very, very important part, whether it be the Islamic wedding, Hindu wedding, or even just in terms of the culture. So yeah. Okay, so as I mentioned before, right, the whole part of this ceremony is that this is a Mendi ceremony, right? So this is more pertaining to the bride herself, that she's getting her Mendi done. And again, you saw footage of her getting not just her Mendi done on her arms, but also on her legs as well. And then we just also saw how somebody was feeding her sweets, or how I would say it, at least in my language, mitai. Mitai meaning sweets. And so again, when it comes to like these ceremonies that prelude to the wedding, that there's going to be, intimate things like, oh, let's have the mending done, because that's a big part of, the ceremony. And then people are going to be like feeding her some sweets or whatnot. Again, something that I've also seen, like if they're together and we have the haldi scene, like people will also be feeding them sweets. And there's going to be like here it's a bit more of a smaller occasion, but the ones I've been to, again, more so like in a banquet style, where there's gonna be like a whole row, there's gonna be like a whole big table right in front of the bride and the groom, and then from there, like each mother or maybe even father will come up, you know, in my case, maybe put like the holiday on, and then after that they'll go and feed them like one of the sweets, and it's like a variation of sweets, not just like you have one. There's like multiple types. Again, what I mean by mithai is like it's just sweets, right? And there's gonna be different types of sweets depending on, again, kind of where your culture is. And like, again, I'm Bengali, right? So we're gonna have more of the Bengali stuff. You might have rashgulam, you might have all that sort of the typical stuff, but there also might be more like things that are more distinct to kind of, you know, one's cuisine or whatnot. But one thing, now the big part I want to mention about that particular scene is that we actually hear the first Bollywood song play in this episode, and it's called Paise Lelo Jute Lelo, which basically means, cause it basically translates into you either, I think it basically means that you give the money or we won't give the shoes or something like that. And I'm about to explain what that means in a second, because that is kind of a bit of a ritual, not a ritual, but kind of a thing that people do during weddings. But it comes from a movie called Hum Apke Hai Kaun, which translates to Who You Think I Am. It is a 90s film that stars Salman Khan and Madhuri Dixit. You might be aware of who Salman Khan is, because he is kind of a blockbuster action star nowadays in Bollywood, but back in the 90s he was kind of like the romantic heartthrob in Bollywood, and this was one of them, of course. And this movie alone is a Bollywood classic, right? Because the whole aspect of that movie, and it really resonates well with this scene as well, is, and that's because like the movie itself really has like this big occasion with a wedding, and it's like a good chunk of the film, like there's gonna be like a wedding scene and all that. And that's why the song that they use really fits well with what's going on right now. It's because, well, it's a wedding, right? So what better way to, you know, play any type of music for a wedding than a wedding from like a wedding song from a Bollywood movie that has a big like a wedding scene. So that's just, again, and again, one of the things about that song that she does play, or that scene, you know, it plays in the background, is that there is kind of this ritual or this practice where at weddings, like this happens on a wedding, not, again, it could depend more so on the culture. Like I've seen it on the wedding day, I've seen it in like Mendi ceremonies, but like in the movie itself they did it on like not the Mendi ceremony, but like more so kind of the ceremony leading up to the wedding. But basically what it is that sometimes if the people in the bride side are able to, you know, grab the groom's shoes, and these are usually shoes that the groom has to wear for the wedding specifically, and that's the whole point, right? The shoes that you want to grab are the ones that are, you know, he has to wear for the wedding. And if the bride side managed to, you know, grab it out of their hands, then the groom side needs to either pay up or, you know, they won't get the shoes back. That's the whole point of it. And it's a kind of like a fun gag that they do. Like, it's kind of like a fun thing that, you know, brides and grooms, like people from the bride and groom side have to, you know, do to kind of, you know, poke fun, make fun, you know, to make the whole wedding scene just, you know, amusing, right? And that's what the song itself is meaning, is Paise Lelo Jute Lelo, basically means like give the money or you're not getting those shoes, right? Again, a really, really nice song that does play not just in the Bollywood movie, but it's a very common wedding song that you'll hear in like any Desi wedding. And not just that, but like I totally recommend the movie itself, because again, it is a classic that even though a big part of it is a wedding, it is also, and not just that, but it's a really fun movie, right? Like the whole thing about the film is that the dynamic between Salman Khan and Madhuri Dixit as like the brother-in-law and sister-in-law and whatnot, but also kind of like lovers. It's just but yeah, but like, but it's like a fun thing that they, you know, poke each other of and whatnot, and it is a really romantic movie, but then it does kind of take a really unexpected turn. And again, so it's kind of like you have the fun, you have the energy, you have the liveliness, but then you also kind of have more of that shock factor that does happen in the film. I do totally recommend you watch this movie, because again, it's like a Bollywood classic. It's really great. It's like one of the I think it's the one movie that really sold the combo between Salman Khan and Madhuri Dixit. Again, like Madhuri is like a really phenomenal actress. from the 90s, and she's still going on today as well. The movie, I will warn you, is like, I believe 3 hours, so there's something that you should take in consideration if you do plan on watching it. But also, if you do plan on watching it, don't like, reserve a half on one day and a half another day. It's better to watch everything in a single, on a single sitting, just because the whole point of the film is that it is a lot of fun. It's like a lot of energy going on, but then also kind of showing you kind of the reality of like what happens in life and all that. So yeah, I love that they played this song. And usually, again, and one thing I will mention in terms of just weddings in general is that there's always a default playlist of all the wedding songs that you always hear in like every single wedding. Like, at least for me, like whenever I go to weddings, I get really tired listening to the same, wedding music from Bollywood, because it's like the only same sorry, it's the same Bollywood music that you always hear in every weddings. It was a bit refreshing to kind of hear a bit more of a oldies type from the 90s, because although again it is reserved as a wedding song, you don't really hear more of like the older stuff as much as you would do with the newer stuff today. So, and again, like the movie itself, not only is like the movie really great, but the music is phenomenal, right? So again, I highly recommend that if you like to kind of get more into Bollywood, this would be a great movie to watch as well. And I love that they played a song from that movie specifically, because again, it does have this very popular wedding song from that movie that you commonly would hear at a wedding. Again, the ones I go to don't really play this as often, but again, it would be a common one to hear. I must have missed this the first time I watched it, but he basically said how one of his shoes I think both his shoes got stolen, and that's the whole point of what that song is. It's literally the song is Pese de lo jute lelo, which means, again, pay up or you're not getting those shoes, right? And so that's a really great way how they kind of mesh this together. Be like, oh, let's play this song. Oh, by the way, the group Amir lost one of his shoes. Although I don't know why he says it's one shoe. From what I'm aware of, it's both shoes. But well, actually, now I think about it, I think it was just one shoe. At least one wedding that I've been to, but the one in that movie was both shoes. So, but yeah, I totally missed that. But now that you know, the song does make sense in terms of the moment, because, well, while the song itself means meaning like, oh, pay up or you're not getting these shoes, Amr did lose one of his shoes because one of the ladies must have stolen it, well, took it, and now you gotta demand the money. So, again, that's real. I can't believe I missed that, but that is a really fun montage, and I know a lot of people may not have understood that part, and let alone how the song itself meshes well with what's about to happen, because it literally happens, right? So I hope that kind of gave you a bit more of a knowledge that kind of was like a really like a surprising new type of information that's like, oh wow, I didn't even think that the song actually has meaning to what's about to happen in the scene. Like, again, that's a really well done. So yeah. Not funny. So Kamala's dad basically summarized kind of what I already said about what a jinn is. They're a supernatural being who could be like what people would consider genie or a demon. I think when my mom described them as kind of like angels in a sense. Again, they're not good, they're not bad, but yeah, and one of the big thing is that they are kind of not within like the whole thing where they live amongst the gods or anything like that. They're actually within our world itself, so they can actually interact with us or something like that. Again, my mom said that they're they're basically invisible, but I believe they can also take up in different forms or whatnot. He basically just summarized what I said earlier about what a jinn is, and I think they did add a bit more of like the whole dimensional aspect where like some jinns just wants to go back home, which is kind of going back to like the other people that Kamala meets in the beginning and who are associated with Aisha. So but yeah. Okay, so in this scene where Kamala's mom is attending to her injury that she has on her knee, she talks a bit more of her immigrant story. And that's something that I think any of us who are, a child of immigrants will understand, because we've always heard our parents' story about, being coming from their country, having moved here at some point to find a new, you know, to find a new life, to fulfill this dream that they can do it here but not back home. But then also kind of talk about the struggles of it. She talks about basically a general sense of like a lot of what my parents have gone through. For my parents, they came to the United States in the early 90s. So a couple of years before even I was born. They came from Bangladesh. They came to the United States in just around the time when Hurricane Andrew had just struck the south side, I think, Homestead. So that's just around the time when they came, and then eventually they got their citizenship and then all that sort of stuff. But before that, my mom even shared kind of just how when they first came here, they were like, roommates with other people, including, I think, my mom's youngest sister. And I think, and they were in South Florida at the time, and we still do at this point, but they would used to like travel around, and then from there they would kind of like look around from here and kind of just like, they basically like traveled all around, around the United States just to kind of explore and whatnot. Like, going to New York, checking out the Statue of Liberty or Twin Tower or whatnot. And then not just that, but also kind of sharing their struggles about it. So, like, for my parents, yes, they used to work at a gas station. I believe it was 7-Eleven at the time. My mom even worked at that time, too, because, again, like, it's not just my dad, but both of them would have to work to, make sure they can meet ends. And, again, it's like this is something that a lot of, not just like any Desi immigrant, but also any immigrant who comes to this country and be like, hey, I'm here to, start a new life and whatnot. And also eventually they'll have kids, and then they'll learn about their story, about the hardship that they've been through. And again, same thing here. Like, I think even my mom has mentioned how even when she came to the United States, she was a bit lonely because she didn't know anyone, right? Like, she doesn't know anybody from her community, whatnot. I think the good part is that I think she had a bit more easier because of the fact that her sister was here. And there were a couple of my dad's friends who came here around the same time as them. So she did at least mix match with like some of his friends and their wives with her. And so she wasn't as lonely as, a lot of other people would be, because of the fact that my dad already had other friends who were already here, so it just made it easier for them to integrate into the United States. But it definitely was not an easy thing, right? Like, probably back then my mom didn't have as many friends at that time compared to now, where she literally has like a whole bunch, like literally from the Bengali community, because like the Bengali community is like it's really big. So like we're talking about like from like throughout South Florida, right? So again, something that I think was a really deep thing, that was like a deep conversation between Kamala and her mom, just to kind of show that like, hey, we've all been through hardships. And even with her story, right, as an immigrant who came to this country, right, it wasn't easy, and eventually things did get easier once she found the right resources. So a very, very nice touch right there. I haven't showed my mom this episode yet because she's not in the United States at the moment. She's actually in Bangladesh. So hopefully I get to show her this scene, and she'll also be like, she'll probably find this to be a very heartfelt moment, because she will really relate to this like in a personal sense, because again, she came here with my dad with basically nothing really in her name, and now it's like everything has evolved since, right? So again, a very nice personal touch. A big main ceremony, which is the marriage ceremony, or how people in Islam would say the Nika ceremony. So as I mentioned before, like even when it comes to the main wedding or the Nika ceremony, this can vary in terms of the religion. Well, now again, Nika is more specific to Islam, but in terms of just like more of a Desi sense, it depends on the religion and the culture. So here we have the Nika ceremony, which is more specific to Muslims. At least the ones I've seen in terms of the Nika ceremony, usually there is a behind the scene thing where when a bride and a groom are getting married, there's usually like actually like a thing where they have like this legal term thing that they have to sign, being like, oh, this is what's going to declare you as, husband and wife. One of the things that now, as I mentioned before, right, there's a bit more of a cultural difference, right? And now here, this is actually not what a typical Nika ceremony would be, or the ones that I've seen, right? So usually when it comes to a Nika ceremony, again, depending on different religions, right? And not different religions, different cultures, right? It could be something like where a bride and groom are in separate rooms and it's a big day, and it's like, okay, well now they're gonna look in, I think there's usually like a mirror type or something, and then there's gonna be like a legal form where they have to sign that will declare them as basically husband and wife. Other cases would be more kind of like this setting almost, but there's a bit more of a ritualistic type that happens. So there's like, what is it? Like, they probably would read something, but it'll be from the Quran or something. Here, he doesn't really read from the Quran. He kind of just gives like an English rhetoric, and I don't know if like maybe that's just like kind of him just summarizing what happens when somebody reads like the Urdu version. But there is sort of like this. We do have like an imam, or I think here it was like a sheikh, who comes in and be like, they would read off the verses from the Quran that would like basically close their marriage and be like, hey, you're gonna be husband and wife. There's usually a bit more aspect to it. Like here, they kind of just like read it as if you were at like a church, and like you have like the priest or something like that reading off the oath, like the marriage oaths, and be like, here's the bride, be like, hey, so and so, will you take, and this is kind of like, they kind of have more of that aspect to it. So I believe they might be a bit more Americanized, but even then, right, it can just vary between what a person and like what the bride and groom want to do, and like they have to discuss this with their family, be like, hey, we want to do this, do you approve? And then kind of just like talk to the people who would be involved, right? And I think that it was actually essential here because while Amr is Pakistani, right, he's Pakistani Muslim, the bride herself is not, it's clearly not Pakistani, right? It looks like she might be a black Muslim American. So maybe for her, it might be a bit more of a different thing with her. Like, I don't know where her family's at, or her family's like somewhere right there. But the way that they have their ceremony might be different from like, a Pakistani one. So, that's why they probably were thinking, instead of just having two separate weddings, like the way Priyanka Chopra and Joe Jonas had their wedding, where they had one that was Hindu and then one that was more Christian. They decided, like, let's kind of like mix and match. Let's still it's still a Muslim wedding because they're both Muslim, right? But let's integrate more, in terms of the cultural aspect, let's integrate it with the Pakistani part, and then as well as more of like what her culture would typically do. So, which is kind of like something like this, where it's like you read the oaths, like the marriage oaths, and be like, do you blah 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 accept whatnot, right? At least for me, when I have attended weddings, we do have like a similar ceremony where you have the bride and the groom side. So similar to like an American wedding or a Christian wedding, where you have like the people watching, and then in terms of just like the actual ceremony stuff that declares the husband and wife, there's like different things that might happen, right? They might have like some sort of like seeds or whatnot they throw into like, well, again, this is a Muslim ceremony, so we don't actually throw into something in the fire. That's more Hinduism, that's more like a Hindu wedding, where they throw something like on the pyre, and you have like a a Hindu priest come in and read like some sort of verse or whatnot, and then I think for them it's like the 7 thing that they have to go around the pyre. Here we don't have that because Islam weddings don't do that. It's more so that there's like other things that might happen, and again, because I am Bengali, there's gonna be more of like a Bengali style to it, where you will have more like a Bengali type of like a wedding dress that the lady will wear, and then the groom side will wear more of like a Bengali type of outfit, and then they would perform their Nika ceremony in front of everyone, right? And again, the Nika ceremony is the one that makes it official in terms of like, oh, like they're now husband and wife, of course. One thing I will mention is that, and something that we'll see kind of here, is that they do both the Nika ceremony and reception back to back in the same day. typically speaking, like again, a wedding could be 1 to 2 days depending on, not 1 to 2 days, sorry, 2 to 3 days depending on just kind of what the family decides. If it's gonna be like a 3 day thing, it's usually like you have a mehndi ceremony, then you have the Nika ceremony in like the middle, and then you have like a reception on a separate day. That's something I have seen before. I experienced both versions. Usually speaking, like having both the Nika ceremony and reception is kind of just a better way to do it, just because like why just have the wedding and then have everyone just go home and then have the reception the next day. It's a bit of a weird thing. But again, it depends on kind of just like what the groom and bride want in terms of like how they want to officialize their their marriage, their pact. And again, like, and in terms of Nika, like again, the Nika ceremony is a big part. Again, some of the things that I've seen in terms of Nika ceremony, you might have ones where it's like they're in separate rooms, and then you have like the mirror. I think that's more of what I've seen with Pakistani weddings as well, that they have them in separate rooms with like the mirror thing, and then the whole the draft or whatnot they have to sign. And of course in here they kind of changed that because of the fact that like the bride is not Pakistani. She's a black Muslim American. So they had to make that change to kind of make it a bit more easy for her to just integrate more of her culture into this wedding instead of having separate weddings, right? So again, this can vary. Again, this is something that is nowadays something that varies in every wedding. Like, I don't think I've ever been to like multiple weddings where they've been consistently the same. Again, it's more so kind of just like what the family decides to do and what they think would be appropriate. And then again, you gotta look into the finances, right? So that would be another big thing, is like what is the most financially stable way to conduct how to like basically perform their wedding aspects and all that. But yeah, that's basically what it is. Again, for Muslim weddings, the main event is the Nika, and this is kind of their Nika ceremony. And as you can see, like, at least for Kamala, she's wearing a hijab. At least whenever I go to a wedding, I don't really wear hijab. Especially during the Nika ceremony part, I don't wear hijab. But again, it just varies between the culture and just what they expect and whatnot. So yeah. At the Bollywood music, they play another Bollywood music in this scene. Again, this is for the main ceremony. So the song that they play is from a movie called Brew. I believe it came out in 2007. It stars Aishwarya Rai and Abhishek Bachchan. And if you may recognize the name Aishwarya Rai because, well, first off, she is again one of the most well-known actresses in Bollywood. But not just that, but she is, I believe, a Miss World winner. She's probably one of the most beautiful actresses in Bollywood, without a doubt. And in this scene, like, I believe the movie Gru. So the movie comes from Gru, by the way. And that movie kind of goes more in terms of just like, it's more period type of movie. Where again, it does have like a central story about a man and a woman kind of, they get married at some point and then trying to, I believe there's some aspect to it where it's just kind of like living the dream as well, like trying to fulfill a dream, like almost like an immigrant's type of story. So that does play into it, and then a big part of it is the relationship between the husband and the wife, played by Abhishek Bachchan and Aishwarya Rai, who in real life are a married couple to each other. And again, this is another movie I would recommend. It's a really great movie. It's, I believe, who is it by? I think it's by Mani Ratnam. But I gotta double check that. But if so, but not just that. But the great thing about the movie Gru is that they have such beautiful music, and that is because it is composed by none other than A.R. Rahman, who is one of the most well-known composers and lyricists, whatnot. Just anybody who is making the music in Bollywood, and you might be familiar with this name because this is the same composer who actually did the music for Slumdog Millionaire and then won an Oscar for it. So again, in this movie, the music is so beautiful because it's like very intimate. It's very like, it's like very romantic, but also kind of like very solemn. It's just a really like it's not something that you kind of have like this bang, like, oh, let's just have like another let's just have like this a banging ass song where everyone's like dancing and whatnot. It's not necessarily the case with his music. There's like something soothing about it. There's like something really meaningful, and even like the tune of it is so soothing and just like, again, like when it comes to his music, it's just phenomenal. I can't remember the song itself, like what the name of it is. I'll put the actual name in the bottom to give you an exact name of the song. But in the music video itself, it's like it goes really deep into just kind of the relationship between the husband and wife and how they've kind of been, I believe it's like long distance relationship because of the fact that the husband has to like, open up his business and whatnot. It's going to change his family's life and everything. So yeah, but it's a really, really heartfelt, heartwarming moment just because in the song itself, it is about a husband and wife, trying to get through this like very, this obstacle that there are, away from each other because he has to deal with this thing with his career, but also it's kind of like this intimate moment where it's like they do love each other. And this is kind of what's going on here, is that Amr and his bride, they love each other, and that's why they're getting married. So again, I recommend watching Gru as well. Another great pick from the filmmakers. So again, bravo on that. Okay, so in terms of receptions, this is pretty accurate. This is essentially the receptions that I've been to, where you literally have like a chair that's reserved. Like you have like this main stage, right? And then you have the chair in the center, which is basically where the bride and groom will sit because now they are husband and wife, right? And then you have everybody in this banquet room where everyone's just kind of just like, intimating and kind of just like having this friendly, just being casual, not really casual, but just kind of having fun, being conversive, and just like, as we will have photos at, photographers at weddings and whatnot, and then you also have like a gift section and you have the cake. This is kind of, again, this is like the typical settings that I have seen in terms of receptions. This is very, very typical. So this is very accurate for what it is in terms of just like Muslim weddings that I've been to, where it's like if you're going to have a wedding, and especially the reception part, this is kind of a great way to kind of show you like this is what ours look like. But yeah, so I just want to mention that this is the reception, of course, because again, I don't think that they would do like the Nika ceremony and then have the reception on a separate day. I think it's all done the same day. And I think even with Kamal's outfit, I believe it's the same one that she wore at the Nika ceremony, so that should have been the hint as well, that they were done on the same day. So yeah. Oh, and one other thing is that a big part of the reception is that they do performances. So with the reception itself, that's where you kind of have the more grand part, where it's like we give the speeches like from the bride and groom side, and then there's going to be performances where it's like people who are closest to the bride and groom, like so like the bridesmaids, the the best man and all that. They will usually have like this thing planned out, like we're gonna have this dance. Usually it's more just dancing stuff, although there might be some singers, like there might be performances from singers and whatnot, but usually it's like a dance thing where everyone's like dancing. You might even have like the parents come and dance, but that's like more of a rare thing that I've seen. But a big one is obviously the siblings, who usually have like a dance piece that they have like done and performed and practiced, and that they're gonna have it done on the night of the reception. That you have done on the night of the reception. So again, very typical thing, something that even I have seen at weddings as well. So this might be more of a cultural thing because I've never seen that before. So it might just be more of a Pakistani thing that they probably do at the reception. I've never seen that in weddings I've been to, because again, it might just be a cultural thing. So just wanted to let you know and just clarify that part. So we have basically the first like dance sequence, like not dance sequence, but the first performance of the night. Usually like when you get to that part of the program where we get to the dancing and all that, you do have like the bride and groom kind of facing a different, like sat in a different area where they can actually watch everyone dance, so that way like you're not just seeing like the butt part and all that. But in this case, we do see Kamala's parents actually have like a dance performance and whatnot. Again, this is the song that they're playing is from a Bollywood movie called Dawn, and because they are a bit older, they're playing a bit more older ones. Even again, like Dawn is a classic movie that stars Amitabh Bachchan, but it comes from I believe the 70s, and that again it works well because these I mean there are older parents. They come from a bit more from that era. They grew up with those films in terms of how they grew up, right? So it's fun that they actually play the Dawn song. They played a song from Dawn. The song itself is called Ye Mera Dil. I believe in the song it may have been Helen. I can't remember who the actual actress was that. But as I mentioned before, like when it comes to Bollywood movies, when it comes to like the whole song bits, like it could be anything ranging from like emotional moments, a dance number, whatnot. In this particular song, I believe it is like a item type of song, like item song where you have like a actress who comes out and kind of just performs, and it's like an item song because it's kind of them and like another character just having like a moment. It's not like you have like a whole group of people behind you just like supporting you and whatnot. It's a bit more of kind of like an enclosed area. But having said that, this is a very, very classic movie with a very popular song, and the movie itself has been it has been not rebooted, but it has been readapted or redone for a more modern version with Shah Rukh Khan. Remember how I mentioned about Shah Rukh Khan? Yeah, he actually starred in a modern version of Dawn. So they remade it. So there you go. They recently remade it for a more modern audience that came out I think around 2008. And they actually played the same song. I believe the whole movie kind of revamped basically the whole movie just a bit more modern to like today's audience today, which is like a bit more energized and lively and all that. And so the song is a bit more of like an upbeat type of song, which in that version was Kareena Kapoor Khan, because she's married now. But yeah. So this is from a movie called Dawn, if you want to look that up. It stars Amitabh Bachchan. This is the 70s version, not the 2008 version with Shah Rukh Khan. Shah Rukh Khan's version is a bit different, but it does have like a similar plot point. It's basically a remade film, right? And the song itself is called Ye Mera Dil. But yeah, totally check it out. It's a really, really great movie. Okay, so this is a dance number with Kamala Khan in it. So again, it's very typical for just any wedding ceremony that when it comes to just the program itself, there's always going to be something with the sibling, like the couple siblings coming in and having their own dance number or whatnot. In this case, Kamala is dancing with her crew, basically with Bruno and Nakia. And for this one, the song that they're playing is from a movie called Dil Bole Hai Deepa, and the song itself is called Dil Bole Hai Deepa. Yeah, funny, right? So the whole thing about this, when it comes to Bollywood, right, it's very common to have songs that are named where its song's name is the same as the movie itself. So not very uncommon. It's very common. The song is very upbeat. It stars Shahid Kapoor and Rani Mukherjee. And Rani Mukherjee is, again, another phenomenal actress in Bollywood. So I just wanted to give that a shout out. The movie itself is a cricket movie. And if you have watched a movie called She's a Man, it's basically the same story, but we worked more in like an Indians type of style, like with the whole cricket instead of like the soccer part. So that's what that movie is. Again, that one is just, it's basically what it is. Like she's a man. You have like a girl who wants to go into cricket, but she can't because she's a girl, and then so she, disguises herself as a boy, right? So same story. In terms of this song, again, it's a very, very upbeat, popular song, and I think the movie itself has a lot of great music. It's very different from the one I mentioned about Guru, where it's kind of a bit more solemn, a bit more soothing. It's like, it's not as upbeat, but it's like very romantic and very intimate, right? And again, that's just more of like A. Rahman's style, because he's not the type of person who'll be like, oh, let's make like a upbeat type of music, right, where everyone can dance to. That's not necessarily how his music works, right? He likes to make music where there's so much meaning to it. Of course, he has made J-Ho, right? Like that has now become like more of a dance type, if anything. But in terms of like when it comes to like composing songs for like movies, he tries to not just like make any random song, right? He wants to compose them in a way that fits with the story that's going on. And especially in the case with Gru is like a very, very like, you know, serious type of film that, again, it's a bit more romantic, but also kind of a bit, you know, not depressing, but a bit more like a bit more heartfelt, sometimes even heartbreaking at times. And that's kind of the sense of how Rahman's music work. And this one is a bit more upbeat. Like, this is a typical Bollywood music that you would kind of hear because it's very catchy, it's very tuned, and whatnot, right? And something that you can dance to. And this is the type of song that you can dance to. And I think even for this song, I believe they have like an actual like sequence where it has nothing to do with a movie. They just have like a whole dance montage of it. Not dance montage, but it's kind of like a dance number out of it. So more so like a typical Bollywood songs that you would hear that are like, you know, a bit more, you know, catchy. So but yeah, Dil Bole Deepa is the name of the song, and the movie is also called Dil Bole Deepa. Very fun song. And later on, you'll see that the groom is actually pulled in, and he actually is part of the act. This is a very common thing that you'll see at weddings, where sometimes either the groom or the bride, or even both, might have their own like secret, secret dance part that they didn't know earlier before. And again, it's like something that it's a fun part of like a really grand ceremony, right? Like, you're celebrating you're celebrating a very special day where two people who love each other are getting married, and now everyone's celebrating it with their friends and family, and that's happening right here, right? And in case with our weddings, when it comes to it, it's very big, grand, and very, you know, exciting moment where you have dance numbers, where you have people, you know, singing, where you have people conversing, people eating, you know, everything, right? So yeah, so this is how our weddings function. If you ever want to go to one, it's a lot of fun, and it's not very. And for anyone who always thought that Islamic weddings are very boring, this is what most Islamic weddings are like. Like, I've been through like so many at this point, and it's always fun. It's not like, oh, you have to sit down and just watch people do whatever, right? No, people are having fun. So let this be an example of what it's like in terms of like how we do our weddings, especially for us now that we are a bit more like, for me as somebody who is born in America, this is the ones that we usually see in like in terms of like the culture here, just because it does get a bit modernized, and it's not the same as like what you would have like in your parents' home country in Bangladesh, right? There's going to be differences, but in a more modernized sense because we are in the United States, and you know, things happen, and you know, there's different ways to kind of get around things, and this is just how we celebrate it. Again, this is a very typical imagery of just what our weddings are like, especially the ones I've been through. So kind of not something I've been through. Usually we just have a DJ who just plays the music throughout the night. We don't usually have a band that's there, but again, that's just more of a preference for the bride and groom. Like, I think I've mentioned this probably a lot, that even though we have things like the Islamic ceremony and how there's certain rituals to it, and traditions that they have to abide by, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be point by point exactly like that, right? Like, again, it just depends on what the bride and groom and their family believe is the best way to approach, what they think would be, you know, financially stable, and then if they want, like, what they think they can do in terms of just trying to, you know, make it a bit more fun, right? We don't usually invite like a band to sing or anything like that. I know that's a very common thing, at least in Christian weddings. And Muslim weddings, I've never really seen a band. We just have a DJ. That's what we do. We just have a DJ who has a compilation of all the Bollywood songs, maybe even in my case Bengali songs, just because again it's also kind of incorporating more like Bengali, you know, culture to it. So we kind of have to play some Bengali songs, at least in the weddings I've been to. But here they brought Brown Jovi, which is hilarious because, again, like they mentioned in an earlier episode that Kamala's parents love Bon Jovi, and then they even played Bon Jovi's song "Living on a Prayer." I'm not gonna play that part, but it's just something episode, and now they're just like putting in the pieces that like, hey, here we go, we have the Bon Jovi band here, just to kind of give a nod to an earlier episode. So yeah, that was a really fun bit. Okay, yeah. In terms of just buying gifts for like the bride and groom, or just any sort of gift, the most common thing is that you give money. At least like I swear I don't think I've ever actually seen like physical gifts like the way I think here they actually had physical gifts, but the weddings I've been to, I've rarely ever seen any physical like box gifts. For me, it's like everyone just gives money, and because again, it's a very joyous moment that people are giving like anywhere between like $100 to sometimes even as high as $500 to kind of just a gift to the new couple, like, hey, congratulations, here is money and whatnot, to like as a gift to and hopefully you live a very happy and long life together and whatnot, right? And I love that they grab the money first, because that is a very important part. Like, if you're getting money, and again, this could be money that can actually pay off the wedding, right? Like, that's a big thing, right? If you can get the money to pay off things, here you go. And I think even earlier he mentioned how he had like only $700 or something like that in his account, probably because of the fact that he's been paying for everything that's going on with the wedding. So he definitely needs that money to, if there's still any like receipts or whatnot they have to pay off, there you have it. So just a quick thing about Kamala's outfit. Very nice salwar that she's wearing. At least I will say, for one thing though, when it comes to like wedding fashion, you always want to go all out. I don't usually wear something as simple as like what Kamala's wearing. It's usually gonna be a bit more like fleshed out. Like, it's gonna be a bit more designed and all that, like a bit more blinged out. Red is a very common color, and I totally forgot to mention this in the Nika video, but usually when it comes to the wedding itself, I know in terms of like Christian weddings and just more of like American like general sense, the bride wears white. For us, the bride wears red. Just a one big difference right there. So I'm a bit freaked out why she's wearing red a little bit, but because she's typically speaking, you don't usually. I mean, it doesn't really matter if you're wearing red or not, but I just realized that she is wearing a red salwar kameez, and that just came into my head that like, oh, by the way, just a quick bit that when it comes to Muslim weddings or just any Desi wedding, the bride wears red. Just so you know. Sometimes there can be iterations of what dresses that they wear, because it doesn't have to always be red. Like, I've actually been to weddings where the bride doesn't always have like a hot red type. It can be like a bit of a pink. It could be a bit more of like a darker, more reddish type. Like, I'm almost like going into maroon. So I just wanted to mention that, but you wear red as a bride. In terms of the guy, I think it can just vary. I think the more popular one is white, which is what Amir wore. But I believe the bride wore something a bit more purplish, from what I remember, or purplish whitish type. So yeah, I wanted to mention that. Again, it can vary, and I know at least one wedding that I've been to where it is an interracial marriage, where they had like separate. I think they had separate like weddings for like different cultures or whatnot. But I think for the main one, they kind of integrated everything, and the bride wore a white sari wedding type instead of like a red one. That's the one I can remember. But again, I think that was more for reception though. For reception, you don't have to wear red. It's just the wedding itself, like the Nika ceremony, it is red. But when it comes to reception, you can wear the same sari or the lehenga that you wore from the wedding, or like from the Nika ceremony, or typically from what I've seen, the bride and the groom changed into something else that will be more appropriate for like a reception. And so you have one for the mendi, you have a wardrobe for the Nika ceremony, and then you have wardrobe for the reception, right? So that in terms of the actual reception, you can wear any color. Like I think from what I've seen, like some ladies would be like the bride would be wearing like a blue type of salwar sari or something like that, or like a pink. It could just vary, right? So the reception is not as strict in terms of like what color you're wearing. Usually for the Nika ceremony, the bride is wearing something red. I think for the groom it's usually white, but again, this can just vary and it's more of a personal preference. So, just a quick bit that just caught my attention is that it looks like there's another Bollywood song, but I can't really pinpoint it here because it is so like intermixed with what's going on with this train scene. So I'm going to assume that in a future episode there's going to be another flashback scene, more so regarding the 1947 thing, because the train aspect gives me that vibe that this is regarding to the partition. And as I think it was this last episode, they talked about the train station scene. Well, not the train station, but they talked about how what happened at the train station where everyone was separated. And again, it was a mess at the time of the partition, where the British again let Pakistan and India just kind of deal with it themselves, and it was just a big mess. And there's always that story about the train station and whatnot. So I wonder if that has to do with that. So I'm going to presume there's going to be more of a flashback scene going back to 1947. But yeah, there is a I think it's a Bollywood movie. Bollywood song that's playing, but I can't really pinpoint it. But that being said, there is in this train, illusion, whatnot, that has a Bollywood song playing in the background. I just can't really figure out what it is because there's a lot going on in terms of like intermixed sound. But I'm going to assume that there might be a reference to this in terms of like a flashback. So 3, 2, 1. So that's basically it in terms of just the Desi scenes and just like the breakdown of like the wedding itself, because there is a lot going on in terms of just trying to give a bit of a background in terms of like the Islamic rituals in terms of like weddings and everything like that. It is a shorter video, of course, because there isn't a whole lot going. There isn't like a lot of Desi scenes going on, but it's just more so that because they are slowly going into Kamala's origins and kind of just starting the evolution of her as Miss Marvel, that there's probably going to be less and less of like the Desi moments. But even that said, like I will continue making these videos in terms of just trying scenes. I would imagine that they're gonna continue to kind of give a bit more of just like what it's like to be a Desi, and especially with Kamala trying to evolve as Miss Marvel, it's gonna be essential regardless. So I'll keep making these videos in the meantime. It might be shorter moving forward because again, we're now really starting to go deep into Kamala's story. But even with that said, like it's something that I would love to kind of give a bit more of my perspective, my knowledge, to let you know, like, hey, this is what this is. Oh, by the way, another Bollywood song, another Bollywood movie. And I know that in this particular episode there was a lot of Bollywood. So hopefully that the information that I just presented will be a bit more helpful, kind of give you a bit of a better understanding of what's going on. And if you ever want to go and kind of check out some of these, songs, or even the movie itself, feel free to, because again, I don't think there's any. So the movie that they at least they put songs in, I would definitely recommend you seeing it. They're good in different ways. They're different stories, but they're all fun. Well, not all fun, but they're all very good movies. So but yeah, that's all I really have to say. Let me know if this was something that was really helpful. And aside from that, as always, like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, that's all I really have to say. So I'll talk to y'all later, and I can't wait for Miss Marvel episode 4. Alright, bye!